Hey, well, kia ora. We're here today to make a significant pre-budget announcement. Standing where we are right now, it's hard to imagine that it wasn't that many months ago that this basin here was completely full of water. We made the commitment when we came up here immediately after the cyclone that we would support the communities affected by the cyclone and by flooding through the recovery effort. That was never going to be an overnight recovery effort. It's one that's going to take some time. And you've seen already a significant level of investment from the government in helping to support these communities to recover. And we want to continue that momentum today. First, though, I want to acknowledge the Cyclone Recovery Minister, Grant Robertson, who's here, who's also the Finance Minister, so busy week ahead for him. Can I acknowledge my ministerial colleagues who are leading various parts of the cyclone recovery across the country? And can I also acknowledge our local members of Parliament who are here, Stuart Nash and Anna Hawke. I can tell you that there aren't many weeks go past where they haven't been, pounding on the table and bashing the door down to share the messages that have been important to these communities here. So particularly want to acknowledge Anna and Stuart. Thank you for being here with us in Hawke's Bay today. Today's announcement is a significant one. We're more than doubling the funding that we've already put into the cyclone recovery with an extra $1 billion in funding through this year's budget. It's part of an ongoing program of work to provide the funding that's needed to support these communities affected by recent extreme weather to recover from them. There's a big emphasis today on rebuilding our infrastructure, particularly around transport, but also looking ahead to how we can better protect communities from these sorts of events in the future. The stopbank here that you see over to my right was recently increased in height through a co-investment between the government and the regional council. And can I acknowledge the regional council's representatives who are here today? Without that, there would have been much more extensive flooding on the other side of it. Raising the stopbank prevented a widespread flooding and potentially devastation. And my understanding, and I've seen the photos, is that the water, from where we're standing right now, got almost to the top of that extended stopbank. So it was a good investment and well worth doing. And it's the sort of thing that we will need to see more of. So there's $100 million in funding for flood protection in the announcement that we're making today. Some significant investment in our road and rail infrastructure. We know that the damage there has been extensive. We know that it's going to take some time to repair, so we want to keep that momentum going. We've already announced the first instalment of funding. Much of that funding's already been flowing out the door to get those essential transport links restored. Today we're announcing a significant additional package of support for that. We acknowledge the social impact that these natural disasters have on communities. So there's a significant emphasis on that in the package of funding that we're announcing today, and that includes funding for our health and education systems, and importantly, more mental health support, recognising the toll that these sorts of events take on the community. One of the programs, for example, that we're extending to this region, Mana Ake, was actually put in place following the Canterbury earthquakes to support young people with their mental health and resilience. It's a successful program. And by extending it into those communities that have been most affected by the recent extreme weather, we can make sure that we're supporting the psychological effect that has on our youngest New Zealanders. And so there's more detail on that in today's announcement as well. And then, of course, continuing to support the community groups who have been helping to lead both the response and the recovery effort. There's a lot of work ahead, and we want to make sure that those community groups are being supported as well. So we made some commitments immediately after the cyclone that we would stand by these communities, we would see this through, and we would help them to recover and to rebuild. Today's announcement is further evidence that we are actually going to deliver on that commitment. We've already put in a very significant investment of funding in a very short space of time. We're more than doubling that today. And we know that over time, we'll need to continue to stand by these communities, continue to see through this work, so that they can recover and prosper. With that, I'm going to hand over now to the Cyclone Recovery Minister and the Minister of Finance, who will share a few more details.
Well, kia ora koutou katoa. Thanks, Prime Minister. Happy Mother's Day to everybody as well. Can I also acknowledge all of my parliamentary and ministerial colleagues, and also particular to the Chair of the Regional Council, Henawai Ormsby. Thank you for being here, and I know you're going to say a few words after I've spoken as well. It is really appropriate that Henawai is here because we committed from day one that this would be a locally led, centrally supported recovery and rebuild. There are a lot of lessons that we've learned, unfortunately, for New Zealand over the last few years when it comes to how we deal with natural disasters, and that's one of them. We want to be here as the partner to this region and other regions that have been impacted by the cyclones and the Auckland anniversary weekend floods. But we know that the real knowledge about what needs to be done lies here in the region, and so I'm really proud of what we've done. It's not easy. There are lots of different things and different hurdles to get over, but we are very, very much committed to that. And that's why it is appropriate to be here today, because this stopbank was funded through what is colloquially known as the Shovel Ready program, and that was a partnership funding program. So I believe we put about $12 million in, and anyway, we'll be able to tell you exactly how much the council put in, but a similar amount, or just slightly less. And that partnership approach is what underpins where we go from here in our ongoing recovery and rebuild. So, as the Prime Minister's indicated, one part of our announcement today is a $100 million fund for co-investment for flood protection in the impacted areas from the cyclone and the floods. I want to emphasise the point that's 1 year's worth of funding. And so we will, over the next few years, inevitably be adding to that. But as we identify where the best places to go are, we can do that. But 100 million for 1 year, I can assure you, is a lot of money, especially when it's a co-investment fund with other councils around the country, as well as here in the Hawke's Bay. As the Prime Minister's also indicated, a big chunk of what we're announcing today is on core public infrastructure. And that's the job of government. Our job is to make sure that the road network, the rail network, electricity, water, all those basic things that are needed are there for people. We're acutely aware of the impact that these weather events have had on communities and on businesses. And the basics of being able to get where you need to go for your work, for your family, for your health needs, for your education needs is critically important. And so in the package today, we've got nearly another $500 million worth of support for our road and rail network. We've already put in significant amounts of resources. And here we're also not just doing the work of state highways, but also local roads. About 60% of the funding that's already gone out the door in transport has been on local roads, which otherwise would be a cost impost on local councils. I think about 91% of all the work that's been done so far on local roads has actually been funded by central government. And we understand that that's something we can do. The roads all interconnect with one another, so it doesn't make much sense for us to fix a state highway and then a local road not to be fixed. So that's a way in which this announcement takes pressure off the local councils when they've got a lot of pressure on them. And it's a work in progress, but I think we saw with the reopening around State Highway 2 and the connection for the people of Wairoa just today, how important these kinds of networks are, and they form a big part of this package. Also, as the Prime Minister's indicated, there is a big focus in our announcement today on the social side of the recovery and rebuild. Just here in the Hawke's Bay and Taradale region, there are 80 schools that need significant repairs or rebuilds. We've got that replicated in a number of other regions around New Zealand. So there's a significant package of funding today to do that work. Some of it's covered by insurance, but actually a lot isn't. And even that is covered by insurance, we're not going to, have those schools have to wait to get that insurance payment before we actually do the repairs and the rebuilds that are needed. So that is an important part of the social infrastructure of these communities. Many schools were the hubs in the immediate aftermath of the floods, and so it's a recognition there too as well. Also in the health area, a significant investment, both in the mental health area, and I just want to emphasise again our understanding of the importance of that. In this community, there have been some tragedies in the wake of the cyclones, and I want to recognise the families and the communities affected by that. We want people to reach out. The 1737 helpline exists for everybody. We have more access now for people through their GPs to primary mental health care, but we know we need to do more. And the extension of the Mana Ake program is for primary and intermediate school children, because that is a lesson from Canterbury that the impacts might not show up even straight away, but they're significant, and we need to make sure we support them. There's also funding to make sure that health services can continue to be provided right across the impacted communities. We know in the Hawke's Bay and Tairāwhiti particularly, also in Northland, there have been some real issues for people getting to health services if they're in isolated communities. So there's additional funding in this package for air ambulances, for all-terrain vehicles, for people to be able to get there, repairs for some of the services where our elderly are looked after. There was some significant damage in some of the rest homes and hospital care facilities that work with our elderly as well. So that is a part of this package, along with significant funding for community groups and for the Ministry of Social Development and others to lead forward in that. There's a couple of areas of work that are underway that obviously are not covered in this package but are clearly part of the next steps. The first of those is what we do about severely affected locations. So you'll be aware of the announcement we made towards the end of last week on the timeline for that work. That is an incredibly important piece of work. I know and I absolutely understand the desire for certainty that people have about their properties and their communities. We've got to make sure we make the right decision as well as the quickest decision. And so we have a timeline for that work now. We're working very closely with the Regional Council on that. What we've done is facilitated bringing the data of insurers and the Regional Council together to be able to provide a comprehensive and quality assured risk assessment. And we will be out towards the end of the month in early June talking to communities about what that looks like. It's a challenging process, but it's one we've got to get right. Following on from that is the inevitable question of if people do have to relocate, or if more work like stop banks need to be done, who pays for that? And that's the piece of work that we're working our way through now. And obviously there are different models for how that works. So that support and funding is part of our ongoing work. The other area is around sector and regional recovery plans. So obviously a significant amount of money has already gone in to support businesses, our growers and our farmers to be able to do things like remediate buildings, remove silt and so on. And we just had an additional package about silt and debris removal announced just last week to be able to carry that work on. Those sector plans, and I think here particularly of the likes of the horticulture sector, are significant. We have had a couple of reports now from the sector and the Ministry of Primary Industries as well. And the commitment that I can make today is that over the next few weeks, we will work with those sectors on options for how we support that recovery. We are a committed partner in doing this, but I think everyone will understand that the government can't pay for every dollar of a recovery or a rebuild of a sector because sadly, these weather events are happening more and more often. What we can do is work out ways that we can make sure the sector can rebuild and recover, and that piece of work is ongoing, and we will cover off more of that in future announcements. So it's still the rolling maul, but this is a pretty significant rolling maul, sort of like a Crusaders one that I saw last night, which is actually making sure that by, as the Prime Minister said, more than doubling what we have done shows that we have this ongoing commitment, but it isn't the end. We'll be back here often to make sure that these communities can recover well and rebuild strongly into the future. So with that, I'll give Niwa a chance to say. Tēnā koe.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ki te Premier, ngā minita, nau mai hoki mai, welcome back. Tēnā koutou katoa a te Mārie. So welcome you all today on this beautiful Hawke's Bay Sunday morning, a Mother's Day Sunday morning. And I'm the chair of the Hawke's Bay Regional Council, and with me is our General Manager of Asset Management, Chris Dolling, who's here to take any technical questions later on. So we welcome the Prime Minister and Minister Robertson's announcement this morning, the package that it brings for our region. The efforts so far in regional recovery have been enormous, but this helps us a long way. As he said, it is part of a long-term partnership and relationship to rebuilding our region. As we stand here in Taradale next to the stop bank, which was a $4 million project, 36% was co-funded by the Hawke's Bay Regional Council. So if you keep that figure in there, Grant, I'm sure you can improve on that co-investment. But we do appreciate, the thought, the consideration in returning back to Hawke's Bay since the cyclone. Thank you very much. What does this mean for the Hawke's Bay Regional Council? It means that we can focus on our rebuild going forward to provide greater resilience for flood protection in our region. It also allows us to think of the welfare of those most impacted. And I can sense that there'll be a reassurance to know that more investment is going into the welfare of our region. That means our people and communities most impacted. That means business and livelihoods. That means wāhi taonga and wāhi tapu that have been ravaged by this cyclone. So we are here. This won't be a sprint. It won't be a one-off sprint. It will be a journey, one foot in front of the other, but together we can do it. Tēnā koutou katoa.
Right, happy to open up for questions.
We've heard estimates of between the cyclone and the floods costing between $9 and $14 billion, and obviously whilst $1 billion is very significant, it is a fraction of that total cost. So why is it can you explain why it's just the $1 billion now, and so where is the rest of the money going to come from?
So we made the decision that this year's budget would reflect the money that we expect to spend now. So this is money that we know we can spend now. Of course, there are some longer term investments that we need to do some more work on. And then, of course, we will allocate the funding for those too. So I've been really clear from the beginning. This is a project that's going to be funded over a period of time as projects are developed, as projects are scoped up, and as they're ready to deliver. The government needs to be there to be a partner to make sure that they're happening. There'll be money coming in from insurance. There'll be money coming in from other sources as well. So central government is not the only funder of that. That number represents the overall extent of the damage, and that will include funding from other partners as well.
Probably just add to that, Prime Minister, that obviously there are bigger and broader infrastructure pools of funding, and I'll have a bit more to say at the budget on Thursday nationwide about what that means. The second thing is that obviously that $9 to $14 billion figure is over a number of years. And so I think when you look at, the best part of a couple of $1 billion that have been allocated just within 3 months, you can see the level of commitment we've got.
So will there be further cyclone money announced on Thursday in the budget?
Well, what will be in the budget will be money that is about the broader infrastructure of New Zealand, which clearly will include the cyclone impacted communities.
We understand that stopbanks cost about $600 million to fix, and yet $100 million was announced today. Again, why is there that discrepancy in the funding? Again,
that's a 1 year piece of funding, and we've sat down already actually with the Hawke's Bay Regional Council and gone through their extensive plan on this. That's over many years. And so what we're saying here is the initial funding that we can allocate now, with some confidence that we know it will be spent, we know it is needed, and it is a co-funding model as well, as indicated. So clearly the councils themselves are contributing as well as the government.
And for homeowners and growers who are buried in silt, you've already identified this, but they're buried in silt, they're homeless, winter's coming and they have nowhere to live. I'm sure many of them will have been wanting some certainty today as to whether they're going to get a stop bank and how soon, and whether it's actually feasible to continue living in their homes or farming on their land. So when will they get that certainty?
Issues around managed retreat are complex issues. If you look at the post-Canterbury situation, for example, it took some time to work through to make sure that the right decisions were being taken. We have to think about this not just in terms of the cyclone-affected areas or the flood-affected areas, but actually the broader principles that apply to decisions that we are going to increasingly be asked to take as a country in coming years in other areas that could be affected by severe weather as well. So we've got to make sure that we're doing that fairly and robustly and transparently, and that does take some time. We're working as quickly as we can. We acknowledge the pressure that the current situation is placing families under. Also want to acknowledge that for many around the rest of the country, they perhaps won't be as aware of the pressure that these communities continue to face. The water may have gone, but actually the residual effects of the cyclone continue to be very real in these communities. So we've got to make sure that we're supporting them right the way through.
Just two things to add to that too. Firstly, we did make the announcement on Thursday about a timeline for people. For those areas where we hope that people can get on quickly with moving, that we can say that by the 31st of May. And then for those more complex areas, we want to begin our consultation with the community straight after that in early June. So I recognise even that time frame is stressful for people, but as the Prime Minister's indicated, we've got to do this. We've got to do this right. Secondly, we've just recently announced additional funding for sediment and debris removal. It's going to be managed here locally, but that also will assist people to be able to go with the next stage, building on the earlier funding we've got. None of that takes away from how hard this is, and the timeline issue you mentioned is a real one as we get into winter, but that's why we brought forward the sediment announcement ahead of this announcement.
So when is this money going to be made available?
It's available now to the local councils, and we working with them. This is a locally led recovery. These are the people who know their areas best. That money is there now, and my hope will be out within weeks.
Are you confident that you can...
Just on the same topic, so what reassurance can you give these local peoples that are struggling that decisions and money will be filtered down fast enough to actually help them? There's a lot of hopelessness on the ground here.
I saw your story last night, Henry, and I recognise the feeling that people have. And the point that we've got here is that the money has been allocated. It's with the local authority. Individual circumstances, I can't really comment on why one application might take longer than another. All I know is we've now made that money available. As you said, it's $170 million worth. We think that will make a real difference, and we'll be working closely with the local council to make sure it gets out.
I guess there's a lot of core infrastructure announcement today, but in terms of the local people, as Amelia said, with people feeling hopeless and homeless with their homes still damaged, what reassurance can you give them that things are moving faster?
Well, they are. I mean, I know it's hard, but as the Prime Minister again has indicated, we have to get this right. The worst thing I think we could do is say to a person or a community, sorry, you can't live here anymore, and then 2 weeks later come back and say, oh, actually, we got it wrong. You know, we have to be able to get this right. The council holds an enormous amount of data that we're drawing on. The insurers do as well. We are moving as quickly as we possibly can.
Are you confident in that data, and are you confident that you'll be able to stick to the timeline you've set?
Yes, I am, but it does rely on a lot of people coming together, the councils, the insurers, ourselves, the banks. But there's been a lot of hard work going on behind the scenes. But the reason we're taking the time we're taking is to get it right, is to make sure that the data is accurate and that people can have the certainty they want.
How do you think locals will react to today's announcements?
I want to acknowledge that for people in the local communities affected by the recent severe weather, they'll be feeling frustrated. These things do take some time. We're working as quickly as we can to get them the certainty that they really deserve. But I hope that they'll take from today's announcement that we will deliver on that commitment. And as soon as things are available and ready to be funded, we'll fund them. So the funding today is very much about those things that are ready to go, where we can get work underway, where we can get started. We're going to keep going. This isn't the end of the matter. This is going to be over a period of time. As projects come ready for funding, we'll be right there to make sure that we move as quickly as we can.
For people in East Valley, what's the communication been like? Are you still communicating with them? Yeah,
look, we are, and our local MPs have been doing a lot of work in that area. The Regional Council and the Hastings District Council have been doing a lot of work in that area. I, again, recognise the frustration. What the people of the East Valley want is to know exactly what's going to happen. I want to know that as well, and to make sure that we communicate with them in a way that provides that certainty. We have to do that together. So, we rely on those who are locally here on the ground, but we are continually supporting that work centrally.
When are you going to meet with the homeowners and the local business owners and the growers to actually hear from them yourselves about what they've been through?
Already, both of us, I think, have already done that, and we will continue to do it. The engagement I talked about before that comes after we bring the material together at the end of May, will be a really critical moment, because that's the moment at which we will be able to start talking about, the options for what happens next. Bear in mind, there's 3 categories there. One of them is the one I've mentioned, where people should be able to move forward, work with their insurance companies. The second is the communities where things like this are going to be needed, where there will need to be lifts and stop banks, and other flood protection measures. And then thirdly, those where the assessment is that there isn't a way forward for that. That's a hugely serious decision, and I'm not going to leap in to talking about it until we're confident about the information.
That will be accommodated for in the budget, just not in the announcement today.
As I said, there are 2 areas where we're working on more, and yes, I will have more to say about infrastructure in the budget.
Going back to the get it right mantra, apply that to the flood spending. There's a lot of school of thought that just putting more stopbank money is not the long-term solution to the problem. What concern do you have that this money would be well spent if there's a rush to spend it?
Maybe I might want to say something about that, but it's both the stop banks, but there's also nature-based solutions as well. Not every community, the right thing will be a stop bank. We've certainly seen the power of water and the power of some of our rivers, and so there are solutions that are different than that can also be worked on.
Yeah, and just to support that comment, that stop bank, either heightening or widening, which is what this one is just one tool in the toolkit. So there are opportunities for spillway areas, for pressure release points. So it's about how you design schemes to better protect the communities around it. So it's not just stop banks.
Would the government be supportive of the regional council investigating dredging of rivers, getting rid of gravel? Because you can make stop banks high, but the level of the river can also come up as well, and that's a factor.
I'm aware that regional councils make those sorts of decisions all of the time now. Yes, it was yesterday, the day before yesterday, I was down in Westport, where dredging is very much a part of how they manage the flow of water within their rivers. Those decisions are best taken by regional councils.
What have you had, more in terms of the bigger budget, what have you had to scrap in terms of the budget in response to the cyclone recovery?
Well, obviously, the cyclone and the extreme weather that we experienced earlier in the year happened right about the time that we were starting to, finalise what the budget package was going to look like. And so we have had to look carefully to make sure that we're focusing our energy and our money and our time on those areas that are most important right now, and clearly making sure that we're recovering from the cyclone, that we're supporting communities that have been affected by severe weather. That has to be front and centre, along with the cost of living. It's clear that we, and I've set this out pretty clearly already, that we've had to consider our choices in the budget very, very carefully, and we've had to make sure that we're focused on the things that are most important right now.
And what does today's announcement mean for recovery in Auckland?
It continues the momentum of the recovery in Auckland, and again, I'll ask the minister to speak to the specifics of that. But we've already done a lot in Auckland. We've already seen significant investment in recovering infrastructure. For example, there's already been quite a lot of money put into supporting local road rebuilds, for example. So we'll continue with that momentum. We've already significantly supported local community organisations who are affecting those communities that have suffered the most because of the recent flooding. And we continue the momentum with today's announcements.
Yeah, and the point well made that this is about the Hawke's Bay and Taradale absolutely is severely affected communities, but it's also about those in Northland Auckland, Thames Coromandel, the Taradale district, Wairarapa. There are areas, pockets right around the North Island that have been severely affected, and these announcements today are also about them. When it comes to Auckland, we do have the Minister for Auckland lurking at the back, but we obviously have made significant investments, local roads, the rail network up to the north is a really significant area that needs ongoing work and will be supported from the announcements that we've made today. Each community is affected differently, and that's why we've taken a locally led approach. We're listening to those local communities about what they need, and they will find within this package things that they've all asked us about.
You mentioned the growers, and obviously there's lots of frustration amongst growers. Have you personally been speaking to them? Have you got a dialogue going with them?
I have, but I've also got colleagues such as Anna Lork and Stuart Nash here who do that every day, also through our Cyclone Recovery Task Force, also through the Ministry of Primary Industries. So we're acutely aware, as the Prime Minister's already indicated, of those frustrations that people have. We have provided emergency support. We've now got a second package of sediment support, and now we've got today, and it will just keep going. So we do understand that. When it comes to frustrations to do with timing, no one will be more frustrated about that than me, because we put the money out there, we want it spent. And so we'll continue to work with the agencies that are responsible for delivering that to be able to meet those needs.
Question Pennyway. How does this level of investment stack up against what you outlined your needs were in the Regional Council's resilience plan?
Yeah, sure. So our total package for resilience was 800 million, but obviously that's over time. So Hawke's Bay Regional Council have to look at their long-term planning schedule, which is over 10 years. and be able to co-invest. And so what Grant's also talked about is the IRG program that achieved the success of the stopbank rebuild. And so we'll be looking more at that discussion around percentage of contribution to the works needed. Now, he talked about the categorisation of risk in the region. What we'll need to do is further work around what are those mitigation measures that we need to build into that long-term investment from both the government and a regional council perspective. So, like I said, this isn't a sprint. We're not going to get it perfect on day one or year one. What we'll do is sit down, look at that partnership and make sure the contribution is enough to succeed as we go along. The other thing we have to consider is that the industry, we can't have all of New Zealand's industry come here to deliver a program in 1 year. So we have to be mindful that the rest of the country also is going through a recovery period. So yeah, all those considerations need to be put together into a plan. But it's a very good start. Absolutely, we welcome the announcement. We'll keep working with the regional sector, which we're a part of, who bring funds into the 2024 budget. Absolutely, we'll be coming back for more. Thank you.
I've got a question for the Hawke's Bay Recovery Minister, if I may ask him one. Just want to know how you find in not actually living in Hawke's Bay, getting across things in Hawke's Bay.
Well, I don't see there's too much difference to what I was doing before to what I'm doing now. We work as a team, and that's how I've spoken. I've spoken to Stuart and Anna about how we should do this. We've agreed to do it as a team, and so Anna's going to continue focusing by liaising with the affected communities and reporting back, and Stuart's going to continue working closely with the Recovery Agency and help that along, reporting back to me. Essentially, the role of the Regional Recovery Minister is to be their voice in Cabinet, and I've been the voice of a part of Hawke's Bay since I got elected to Parliament, because of course the Waited Upper electorate goes into Central Hawke's Bay, and when this structure was set up, you don't just stop taking an interest because you don't have a role. So this is basically formalising something we were already doing as a team anyway.
I have some questions on the goings-on of the Gore Council, if I may. Specifically to the local government minister, I understand Gore Council is going to be meeting with you. Will you take that meeting, and in general, what do you make of the situation down there?
I understand they're going to write a letter. I'll read the letter before I decide on what I'm going to do there. But the important thing is that a relationship breakdown doesn't warrant specific intervention from the government. You know, we've had a couple of examples recently where there have been intervention. Tauranga, where commissioners were put in, but that was at the end of a very long process of trying to get things sorted. And in Invercargill, where all that took was some independent advice to come in and restructure things and make it work. At the moment, Gore Council is meeting its statutory requirements, so as per the Act spells out, there's no need for me to step in. But we are keeping an eye on it. Department of Internal Affairs are working with the council to try to help things get things sorted. But ultimately, at the moment, that's on them, and I would encourage them to focus on a solution.
Right, so they've asked for a meeting, but you're going to read a letter?
Well, they said they've written to me to ask for a letter. I've asked for a meeting. I haven't seen the letter yet. So someone saying they've written is one thing. Actually getting the letter and seeing what it is they have to say. I understand that there's a meeting coming early next week. It may result in a solution. Who knows? But if a group of councillors want to meet with me and they write to me and ask for that, I'll look at what they have to say.
Have you been in touch with him there himself?
I met him at the Zone 5 and 6 conference along with all the other South Island mayors, and I asked him how he was getting on and all that sort of stuff, as I do with every other mayor, but we haven't sat down to talk about the issues in Gore specifically.
If we go back to Hawke's Bay, the ministers will have heard that the port ask here in Hawke's Bay is in the 800 million range. Is that, you find that a daunting number?
Oh, look, I've seen that report. There's about 3 reports floating around, and they're all in that range. I mean, this is a severe event. It's had an enormous impact on the horticulture sector. Our job is to work through what is contained within that, where the costs of that fall. But, you know, these severe events come along. It is a good indication, this whole announcement today and those reports is a good indication of why governments need to be careful about the way we spend our money, because we need to have money in the kitty to turn up to do this kind of thing. And there's lots of things people might like to do when they're in government, but one of my experiences now of nearly 6 years is there's a lot of things that come along that you have to deal with and that are the right thing to do. And I believe that's what we're doing today, and we'll keep working with the horticulture sector on those
Saying
numbers.
about 2 weeks or so away from.
Yeah, that dialogue's underway, and we've got to work through the ins and the outs of it, and but we'll get there.
Has the East Coast been neglected in previous budgets? And but should this not have happened decades ago? I mean, climate change has been affecting the East Coast for decades.
And look, there has been support that has gone in over the years on this coast, and I don't think you can necessarily look back and say was every precaution taken. Perhaps in some cases it wasn't, but I know governments have taken seriously the investment. We're the government today. We're dealing with what's in front of us right now, and I think when you get the best part of $2 billion allocated in just a few months, that shows how serious we are about getting this right, and there's more to come.
I might ask the Regional Development Minister whether she wants to add a comment to that, because I have actually recently received a report on the level of investment that this government has made right the way across the East Coast, in terms of the Provincial Growth Fund, in terms of shovel-ready projects and so on. And it has been extensive. It's been far greater than I think the coast is, the East Coast of the North Island seen in a long, long time in terms of central government support.
Yeah, thank you, Prime Minister. Look, in both my hats, local MP for the East Coast, but also as Minister for Regional Development, I can say that over the past 6 years, we've invested heavily in areas like Tairāwhiti and all the way through this East Coast region. We started that with some major funding and investment in our roading infrastructure. Look, there's always going to be a greater need, and we acknowledge that, and we're working on that. But whether that's through roading infrastructure, housing, whether that's through critical building and infrastructure projects throughout the region, substantive more investment over the past 6 years than what our region's seen in a very, very long time.
Could previous governments have done more?
I think that's a fair comment that my colleague, Minister for Finance, Grant Robertson, just made, is that have things been done ideally over, many years? Perhaps not, but this is something that we are very clearly focused on. As the Minister just said, over the past 3 months, almost $2 billion has gone into cyclone recovery, and that's everything from hard infrastructure through to things including health and otherwise. We have a big task ahead of us, but we've invested billions of dollars into the regions, and particularly regions like ours, over $500 million, if you pile it all up from Provincial Growth Fund, shovel-ready projects. A lot of money has gone into our region, transforming it. And look, we'll continue to invest where we need to.
All right, we might wrap up there.
One last question.
One last question. You can have the very last one.
Thank you. For the Minister of Sport.
Oh, yes. Right.
Just your thoughts on the passing of Bruce Robertson and any relation?
No relation. But as a kid growing up, he was one of my heroes.
Yeah.
The Prince of Centres. He played an extraordinary number of games. Nowadays, All Blacks play dozens of, more than a dozen tests a year. To play more than 100 games for the All Blacks during the era that he played was an extraordinary thing. He was instrumental in a number of incredible All Black wins, playing over a long period of time. And then, like many people, he contributed significantly after he retired in coaching. So he's an enormous loss, a Hastings product, obviously, although he played his rugby mainly for counties. But I'm sure he would have been proud of here, and I'm sure people here are proud. So we definitely acknowledge Bruce's passing and give our condolences to his whānau.
Thanks, everybody.
Kia ora.